it looks like the end game is going to be a failure to deliver. So there seems to be blood in the water as gold broke through the 3,500 level and silver broke over the 39.40 level. The action to me looks squeezy.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin weekly specials for September 15th through September 22nd, 2025, while supplies last. This week, 1 10th-ounce gold maple leaves are just $37.50 over melt per coin. 1 ounce assorted silver bars are just $1.65 over spot per ounce. We also have near historic low premiums on pre-1933 gold. Call us for details. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're delighted to have this widely followed returning guest, Bill Holter, a former Wall Street branch manager and an analyst of all markets, as well as a bullion dealer, joins us this Tuesday, September 16th, 2025. Bill, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Thanks for having me down again.
Our viewers look to you for a experienced assessment of what's going on in the metals markets, and also if you want to include geopolitically or financially, economically, they see you as someone who's got their boots on the ground and their head on straight. So could you first give us your assessment of recent market movement in the metals markets, and if want to reference the dollar strength along the way and how that's changing things, go right ahead.
Yeah, it's not dollar strength, it's dollar weakness. We're less than half a point off the 96 level, which would be a new low for this move. Another thing that I've been watching, and I think might have talked about it with you a month back, is the yield on the Japanese bonds. The 30-year yield now is over 320, and that was it was a resistance point. We've gone through that, and I mean, frankly, if you look at the action in gold and silver, they look squeezy. And they look like the beginnings of a short squeeze. Now, obviously, I mean, you can look at lease rates on silver. You can look at lease rates on SLV, the borrow rates. They're all getting more expensive. And I mean, frankly, it looks like the end game is going to be a failure to deliver. So there seems to be blood in the water as gold broke through the 3,500 level and silver broke over the 39.40 level. The action to me looks squeezy.
This is something that we've heard just recently. This is a new phase, it seems, of market behavior. It's no longer the old regime where the concentrated short players are able to just at will knock down the price. It seems that there's a floor under it. Do you also see any effect of the recent adding of silver to the strategic materials list by the U.S. government as affecting that sort of a floor under the metals, or do you think it's physical off-taking of metals, and where do you see that the change coming into play?
Yeah, that news broke, a week or 2 weeks ago, that silver was going to be added as a strategic metal. But if you go back, what was it, probably 2 months ago, Russia announced that they would be also adding silver and stockpiling silver. So there is physical demand from all over the world. I mean, the BRICS nations are they're stockpiling gold, and now it looks like they're stockpiling silver. The world understands that the dollar's days, the good days, are behind it, and it's ultimately going to collapse. So you've got central banks all over the world trying to unload gold onto their balance sheet, because gold, I mean, the best way to describe gold, it's the anti-dollar. So as the dollar collapses, gold goes higher, and it makes up for losses that they'll be taking on their balance sheet. On the dollar side, they'll gain on the gold side. One other thing, if you look at the world and come to the conclusion that basically the world is at war, and part of war is financial war. If you think about it, what's the easiest way for the East to blow up the West? Would be to blow up the financial system. And the way to do that, the Achilles heel is gold. And the fuse to that Achilles heel is silver.
I want to really dig into this metaphor that you're using of the world is at war and financial war as part of that, because for ordinary citizens of the United States, it has felt, at least for the past, you could start back on 9/11. You could start at the beginning of the lockdown era about 4 years ago. You could start wherever you want. It's felt to many ordinary people living in the U.S. that they've been behind enemy lines for a long time. It broken down trust, not only in their so-called elected representatives, but also in the mainstream media that's supposed to be reporting on what's going on. So let's take a look at that. Is the reality of that hitting home, and where it hits our pocketbooks, where it hits our ability to have freedom of action? What are some key elements of that? Living behind enemy lines, or living in a war, not only between countries. I think that's where you started here, was we're at financial war between like the East and the West, or where the BRICS and the London/New York led Western coalition. And we can focus there if you like. But what about this, even within our own country, feeling that people are trying to get ahead and they just simply can't do it? The next generation that feels that the deck is absolutely stacked against them. And we had George Carlin warn us that like 40 years ago, but now it's like they can't even get out of their parents' basement. So can you start maybe with that international picture that you were describing? Give us more backstory on that, examples of what you're seeing there as far as financial war playing out. Perhaps it's in early stages still, and then domestically as well.
Well, let me just start domestically. I think, first off, the country is divided in so many different ways. It's divided between left, right, conservative, liberal, and there's so many other different ways. I mean, by race, by religion, you name it, the country's split. And you're going to be disappointed in this answer, but nobody's going to step up. If you're feeling like you're falling behind or whatever, nobody's going to step up from the government or anywhere else to save you. This illustrates exactly what you, myself, and a lot of other bloggers have talked about over time, is that you need to become as self-sufficient as you possibly can. You need to protect yourself, your family, because no one else is going to do it. Now, internationally, that's pretty simple also. What are tariffs? Tariffs are, if you want to call them, they're fighting words. Every time we put a sanction on Russia, what is that? Is that, is it a greeting card, or is it a financial act of war? So it's, from an international standpoint, it is the world is fighting over trade, if you will. Because trade got so imbalanced, where the United States, our biggest export was dollars, and we imported real things. And the world got to the point where they got tired of exporting real stuff and accepting dollars. And they're looking for a way out from under the dollar hegemony. Unfortunately, it is East versus West, but they're acting logically and doing they're making logical decisions, logical acts, and the most logical of all, if they want to get out of dollars, is to stockpile gold. And you're seeing that, you've seen that in the price of gold. You've seen that in the price of gold since October of 2023, when was it 2023 or 2022? I can't remember. But if you look at the gold chart, you'll see it virtually to the day after the Russian reserves were confiscated, gold started going higher because the rest of the world looked at that and they said, hey, if the United States can steal Russian gold, can steal Russian assets and get away with it, what could they do to us? They could destroy us. So, the logical move is to offload dollars/treasuries and unload gold, because gold has no borders. Gold is borderless. Gold is accepted everywhere in the world.
We just heard today, it was actually published, I think, last night by Mario Ineko interviewing King Kong from Hong Kong, talking about the Shanghai Gold Exchange network of additional warehouses that they're opening up in Dubai and Hong Kong and everywhere. And in addition to that, a overnight repo facility that's being established to enable warrants, tickets for delivery of physical gold in any of those warehouses to be used as collateral for overnight loans.
And that's the key word, collateral. Because if you look at the world, there's very little collateral left that's unencumbered. And what they're doing is they are bringing gold front and center, and that will be used as the collateral to margin or leverage or whatever word you want to use to make settlement. And in order to make settlement, you've got to have overnight repos. You have to have overnight money. So, it's not just from the standpoint of they're trying to protect their balance sheets against dollar losses with gold, dollar gains, if you will. What they're doing is they're trying to fully bring gold into the system where it's not just an asset held by central banks and sovereign treasuries, but it's an asset that can be used to settle trade.
Back to the domestic front where you started, ironically, we've heard that the greatest financial asset of the United States of America was recently stated to be student debt.
Exactly.
So talk about something that's somebody else's liability, and these people who are unemployed. It's been that way for
many years. I mean, and it's shocking. And what was Biden trying to do? He was trying to write off loans, trying to write off, some of the parts of the largest asset. And like you said, if you're using, if your biggest asset is the biggest liability of a generation that can't think for themselves, how strong is that? How strong is that asset? The asset is nothing.
That's what's echoing in my mind is something that you and Jim Sinclair have said for at least a decade, and that is, what is the value of a contract that can't perform? This gets back to your statement from just a moment ago, the only thing left in the world that can be used as collateral is gold. This is a big deal, and it's not just in times, not just between countries, but it's an absolute that has proven itself throughout history. What do you say to people whom you meet, because I know you do as a broker and I do, who have such normalcy bias that they feel that what they've seen for the past 40 years here of the Fed seeming to have control over interest rates and bond rates, the Fed seeming to be able to rescue the markets when they get in trouble, the markets always come back, always buy the dips, the equities always go up, the 60-40 stock to bond portfolio. People say, and oh, by the way, now we've got Trump elected, so we got a new sheriff in town. Okay, we're going to clean up any of the wrongdoing that was done over the past couple of decades. We're going to be after the races, and golden days are, I'll say, okay, brighter days are here again, because that's what they have been used to for the past 40 days is a rising and nominal priced stock market and rising or bonds holding their value. What do you say when you encounter people who believe that all you got to do is just wait a little bit and everything bounces back?
Sadly, I try less hard to convince people at this point because it's so obvious. And if you can't see it, in my mind, it's not somebody I can help. Uh, I generally try to, if I meet somebody, and let's say I think right off the bat they've got cognitive dissonance. My first question is the U.S. government broke? And 95% of the people out there will say, yes, of course the government's broke. But it doesn't matter. It does matter, or it will matter. It doesn't matter until it matters. But when it matters, everything paper is gone, because everything paper is held up by a foundation of U.S. treasuries, which are issued by a bankrupt entity.
What about that notion of the non-U.S. centric nations pivoting away from the need for treasuries for this overnight repo? They need liquidity, but they've found a way to work around that and to use actually promissory notes for gold as collateral rather than the U.S. treasuries. Do you foresee that adding to the dumpster fire of a falling international demand for the U.S. treasury? And how does that play out step by step in your view?
Yeah, it adds to it just from the aspect of those entities are no longer buyers and they've become net sellers. So that creates more supply, more treasury supply, more bond supply, which means lower prices, and it means higher yields. I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Genius Act and the stable coins. I mean, the whole premise behind that, and they've already sniffed it out. I just posted an article today on my website from, I think it was the Asian Times. They've already sniffed that out, that the stable coins will be used as a source of demand for treasuries. And then what happens 2 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever, when the U.S. decides to break the peg between stablecoin and the dollar, and they collapse the dollar? I mean, the East has already sniffed out that this is a fake way. It's a way to get something for nothing, and that something is paying off the debt of the U.S. with nothing.
Yeah. The old joke used to be, well, why doesn't the government just print a trillion or 10 trillion or $50 trillion platinum coin and say, there,
right,
we'll pay off the debt.
At least that would be a platinum coin.
Right. Whereas the Genius Act, okay, so you've talked about the financial impacts of the Genius Act that the East is saying, we're not buying it. Maybe you can, and it's interesting because Alistair McLeod, former bank director, whom we interview about once a month, says it's always the people within a country of a failing currency that are the last to recognize the vulnerability of their own currency. The international users of that currency always sniff it out first. Any comments from you on that?
Well, that's absolutely correct. I mean, it's like living in a fish tank with a cover over it. You don't get to see what's outside. You don't get to hear the news from the outside. I mean, can you imagine you and I being interviewed on CNBC or Bloomberg or one of those? I mean, Americans do not get real news. And unfortunately, Americans don't dig. Americans are lazy. They open their phone and whatever's on Facebook or Meta or LinkedIn or Substack or whatever, that's their source of news, and that's it. Foreigners have not done that. Foreigners have not, and when I say foreigners, I'm not talking about like London or like Britain. I mean, the censorship in Britain is horrendous, and there's censorship in China, there's censorship elsewhere, but the world is cognizant that the U.S. is broke, and they're not getting a sugar-coated American view, and that's what Americans get, is a sugar-coated American view. All is well. Oh, the stock market went down. Well, you should be buying because it's going to be up next month or 2 months or whatever from now. Americans have been brainwashed.
This failure, this total failure and neglect by the mainstream financial press to speak truth to people within our country about what's really going on is bound to have dire financial consequences on hundreds of millions of people, just as their failure to warn us about health consequences of certain things had dire consequences on many ordinary people. So let's get back to this idea of living behind enemy lines and war within the borders of your own country. You've talked to us about preparedness and the necessity of not waiting for the nanny state to come take care of you. You're going to have to figure out how you're going to get your needs met. In addition to direct assets that you could own yourself, having the means, food and water and protection and sound money. What about relationships and networking, either in a community or with others of like-mindedness, to be able to support yourself where there are strength in numbers and diversity of skills or diversity of resources? What are your thoughts in that arena?
Well, first off, you cannot be in an urban area. I mean, you could have 100 people like-minded, but you're still going to get wiped out. You still, spit out in your window and hit your neighbor's window. You can't live like that. You've got to live rural. And it's obviously important to have a network, because one guy's got chickens, another guy's a rancher, another guy's a mechanic, another guy's a carpenter. I mean, things happen over time. Things break. You need things fixed. And one person, you can't know everything about everything. You've got to have help. And obviously you need to be like-minded. One of the problems today is because the country is so divided along so many different lines. It's getting harder and harder to find like-minded people with enough thought of different topics that coincide with you. I mean, do you really want some purple-haired tranny who lives 1,000 yards away from you? Do you want to rely on something like that? No, you want to rely on, for lack of a better term, salt of the earth people that think the same way you do.
It's interesting. One of our good friends who was a pioneer in urban chicken farming in the last town that we lived in had to butt heads with the city council, got told by multiple visits from the police that people were complaining about not only his chickens, but his beef farm. This is in an urban area, a small town, but still. And surprisingly, was able to put together a presentation on the benefits to a community of having urban chicken farmers, and was able to find someone to make an alliance with who had completely different life values in most areas, but at least agreed on this idea of being able to raise your own backyard meat, that sort of thing. And they got together, they did a presentation for the city council and got them to remove any language in there that made it sound like that unless it was some of the large, specifically named agricultural animals that they said really don't belong inside the city limits, that they could still do it.
But that's not going to work. Then again, that's not going to work. If you're talking about an urban area, you're going to have guards stand around the chicken coop or whatever 24/7. You go to bed and you wake up and all your chickens are gone.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because
so
that's the way society is today.
Yeah. Right.
Now,
when you have a breakdown of law and
19...
order. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. If this was 1930, that was a different time. 1930, we were still somewhat of an agrarian economy, and you had the thought process of neighbors helping neighbors, as opposed to the thought process now of neighbors stripping a weak neighbor clean. And that's the way of the world today, unfortunately. Like you said it with the rule of law. The rule of law is breaking down mentally. Because people think, oh, well, you have this and I don't. Your stuff is my stuff. I mean, that's the thought process today.
When you look at society at large, you can roll it back and go, wait a minute, how did we lose? Of course, that's toddler logic, right? Toddlers look at someone else who's got all the Lego blocks and they say, well, I want them, I'm going to take them. So that's something that you have to be taught as in a family by a mother and a father, typically, who are on the same page about enforcing discipline and enforcing rules of fairness or rules of structure, and you upbring the child in a way where they understand that they operate within relationships and responsibilities and duties, and they don't just get to act like toddlers the rest of their lives. There's been a big breakdown of families and of rearing of children who understand God's laws and family laws and country laws. However, it doesn't help when you have elected officials with wielding great power who are also operating outside the law and acting as though that nothing applies to them. What do you think about that? About the examples that young people, the new generation, see in front of them all the day of the people on either in government or in the media or wherever who seem to be being able to declare, I'm going to declare what reality is, or I'm going to declare what the law is for myself because I don't have to follow the rules.
Well, I think very briefly, I would just say, how often do you hear about parents, oftentimes single mothers, teaching their kids how to steal? They teach them how to steal now. And they teach them that they're entitled to it just as anyone else is entitled to it. And it doesn't matter how you get it. I mean, it's been a breakdown of, like you said, a breakdown of the family. But, you know, kids are, the human being is born with either, you know, a good heart, a gray heart, or a dark heart. But I am of the belief that it's the environment that a kid grows up in and what they're taught. I mean, I'm sure you're the same as me. I remember stuff that I was taught when I was 4, 5, 6 years old. I remember that. I remembered if I messed up, I got whacked on the ass. And today, God forbid, kid does something stupid in public and a parent whacks the kid. Well, here comes Child Protective Services.
And the other thing that just flowed out of what you were saying is, in addition to the raising of the child, they're looking up and they're seeing up the food chain, is that even when there's a social contract within a civilized country that has the rule of law. In other words, if you work hard, apply yourself, use self-discipline, respect the rights of others, you're going to get ahead because there's going to be opportunities that will provide themselves to you, and you'll do well. But when people see this chronic environment of that, those who are in the in club, as George Carlin used to say, there's a big club and you're not in it. In other words, it can be very demoralizing and disheartening for those who look ahead and they say, no, see, even if I work hard and even if I apply myself and even if I try to better myself, the deck is stacked against me. The system is hostile to me thriving and me being able to have a life where I can get to have a home and get to have children and be able to build a future. It can be very depressing or discouraging to those when they see that they're living in a corrupt system. Now, you could say that people should still rise above that because there's a greater law above the civil authorities.
Yeah, but let's go full circle back to, we talked about student loans. Let's talk about education. I mean, kids are taught, in my opinion, and I mean, this is obviously just an opinion, this is not math, but in my opinion, kids from preschool on are taught, they're not taught correctly. Everything is left-leaning, everything is woke. You get out of high school, whether you can do any math or English or whatever, you get into a college, you take a student loan out, which is not going to get repaid, and you get out of college and you got scrambled eggs from brains. So, I mean, it's not just the family unit. This is a plan. This has been a long-term plan to gut the United States by gutting the intelligence of the youth. When we were kids, the United States had, we were always either number 1, 2, or 3 or whatever worldwide in education. Where are we now? Something like number 26, or I don't even know what the number is, but we can't be anywhere near the top. And all you have to do is talk to a 22-year-old today. a kid that supposedly, just got out of college. Talk to a 22-year-old, and they got like marbles in their mouth and scrambled eggs for brains. Nothing makes sense.
I know we interview Alex Newman, who's the founder of publicschoolexit.org, convincing people that their children and their children's future would be much better served with homeschooling rather than going into the government school. The government school was supposed to be, again, it's always for the good of the kids, right? It's always to make sure that everybody was literate, to make sure everybody knew their civics, make sure that they didn't get neglected, and they had a hot lunch and this kind of stuff. And pretty soon you end up with what you described. It ends up being distorted away till it drives a wedge between the parents and their children, and it replaces the parents with the state. Now that's
right.
That's been part of Marxism since the early 1900s. Where do you see this playing out? I'm going to zoom back out to where the rest of the world, you said, has already sniffed it out and seen the emperor doesn't have any clothes on, but the people living within the country are still acting as though the emperor has clothes on. How does this realization about the next generation, their preparedness, their fitness for, in fact, and some huge proportion of today's youth are considered physically unfit and not even,
and
for example,
mentally unfit.
And the armed forces says they aren't even recruitable because they can't qualify at the basic levels. That lesson can't be lost on international observers of the U.S. from outside, seeing the aging tiger or eagle or whatever, if you want to call it that, showing its weakness in the next generation. What do you think the lessons of history prepare for countries that are going down the path that we're going down? And I think finally we got to talk about what individuals can do about it. But first, what do you think on the international scale?
I would just ask, why do you think foreign NGOs are funding so many things that are detrimental to the United States as a country, as a whole? I mean, it's a takedown. And you're asking me where it goes. I mean, I'll just go back to just plain mathematics. The U.S. government is broke, and the entire financial system is going to collapse, and we will spend a spell. Is it 2 weeks? Is it 2 months? Is it 6 months? God forbid, or more. I don't know, but we're going to go through a period of time where your perception will be that your life is within Mad Max.
Facing that, what are some concrete steps you think individuals can and must do? You've talked to us in broad terms about not living in crowded urban areas and having some resources. Any other thoughts from you on that regard?
Yeah, just become as self-sufficient as you possibly can. And I mean, if I had kids, I would homeschool them. When they got to be 18 years old, I would tell them, you want to go to college? Fine, that's your decision, but you pay for it. You want to go to a trade school? I'll pay for all of it. Because someone that goes to trade school will be able to provide for themselves with an actual skill for the rest of their life. You get kids that go to school, in their literature majors or whatever, they have no skills whatsoever other than to just spew, repeat what they've heard.
Yeah, that's we've seen that even playing out over the last decade, that those who went to trade school are doing, in many cases, much more maintaining stable
and they
employment.
have less debt.
Yeah, and I mean, that's true. Yeah, you come out of higher education with 200 grand or more of student loans saddling you down, and it's hard to overcome that. That's one of the things that make it really discouraging, is that feeling of loss of freedom from the weight of the chains of the debt that you come out of the system. And yet the system always says, but it's for the kids. It's for the kids. We got to have more. We just interviewed Mitch Wexler, who's a spearhead whistleblower about the debting on the parts of school districts all across our country that are basically unpayable. They just roll over into bigger bonds and bigger bonds and bigger bonds. They have to keep upping everybody's home valuations to astronomical levels just to get the tax revenue.
That's another scam on its own. So you throw a big party when you pay your house off. Guess what? You're still going to get a bill the next year, the following year, the year after that. and those bills are going to go higher and higher and higher, your tax bills, and a huge amount of foreclosures are going to happen. And again, this is not Bill Holter's opinion. It's math. All you have to do is look where we were, where we are now, and where it's headed. It's mathematically, financially over.
Any additional constructive ideas for people to take action even in small ways this week, this month, this year, in order to better their likelihood of getting through what's coming intact as a family, as a community?
Yeah, we've talked umpteen times about being prepared, but preparedness is not just stockpiling food or stockpiling gold and silver or stockpiling lead. Preparedness, you need to be prepared mentally, physically, spiritually. You need to prepare yourself for the battle, and the battle's already begun. People can feel that.
Bill, for people who want to take advantage of your weekly writing and videos that you do, where should they get connected with you?
Oh, you can just go to my website, billholter.com. And I should mention, and I've mentioned the last 3 or 4 interviews that I've done, there is an icon up top called Grizzly's Corner. It's a very, very good resource for physical prepping. There's many, many links to that you can use. I think there's about a dozen articles written by a very good friend of mine who the reason it's called Grizzly's Corner is because I think this guy might have been Grizzly Adams' mentor. So definitely check that out. And if you want to contact me directly, you can go to my business email. It's bholter@proton.me.
Bill, as always, thanks for joining us again on Liberty and Finance. I know sometimes we've had technical difficulties, but we struggle to overcome them. And
it's always on my end, though.
We're always grateful for your presence here. Well, I mean, it's a very interesting thing because you live far out, typically from the population centers, that kind of thing. And it's an interesting perspective for people to think about, how would I get by, and how dependent am I for my ability to thrive on being completely plugged into these services that are uninterrupted and always available, rather than getting a taste of needing to be able to function and make a contribution and get by, even if you don't have continuous access to all those, I would say, luxuries that big cities life can provide. So I know that there are counterbalancing things that you don't get in the big city, like you get to see the stars, for example, and some beautiful things out there in the country. So get to put your feet in the grass and not worry. If my wife was just telling me that they just sprayed our whole neighborhood now, where's she going to put her feet in the grass? So anyway, you get some of that when you're not subject to some of this modern.
Yeah, there is a way for you to find out what that would be like. Just come home on a Friday, turn your power off, don't turn it on until Monday morning.
We'd lose a lot of stuff in the freezer, I'll tell you that.
I'm absolutely. But if you turn the power off and you've provided with generators or solar or what have you.
To support those critical functions, yeah.
Right, exactly. That's why I'm saying if you turn your power off on a Friday and turn it back on a Monday, you'll find out where some of the holes are in your plan.
Preparedness plan. One thing
I did it once, and it's tough.
It's painful.
But we're all going to have to do it.
It's painful. One of the things we do, a tiny thing we do on an every night basis now, is more for our health, as we unplug the 5G Wi-Fi. It's like, okay, we're not going to be having that blasting. You have your neighbors still have it, but
right.
at least you can not have your own during the sleeping hours.
My neighbors won't reach me.
Good. Yeah, that's the other part of that separation. Bill, thanks again. Always appreciate it. And on behalf of all of our viewers and subscribers, thanks for being with us here on Liberty and Finance.
Thank you, Donegan.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin weekly specials for September 15th through September 22nd, 2025, while supplies last. This week, 1 10th-ounce gold maple leaves are just $37.50 over melt per coin. 1 ounce assorted silver bars are just $1.65 over spot per ounce. We also have near historic low premiums on pre-1933 gold. Call us for details. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.